Oregon, and a really bizarre anti-government protest is playing out on a remote wildlife refuge.
It is bizarre. You've got armed, self-styled patriots taking over this federal government refuge, building as well, saying that the federal government is wrongfully punishing two local ranchers and violating their land rights. They call themselves now, they just gave themselves this name a few hours ago, the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom, and vowed to occupy the refuge until their quote-unquote rights are restored.
The main issue here is the federal government does not have authority to come down into the states and to begin to control the land and resources. We're going to stay here until we have secured the land and the resources back to the people of Harney County, and where they can get back to ranching, get back to logging, get back to using these lands without feeling fear and intimidation, and that's our goal.
Now, the two ranchers say that these protesters are rallying around were convicted of arson. They actually burnt land in what prosecutors said was an attempt to cover up poaching.
And their lawyer says they don't need the activists' help. Well, so far, law enforcement has actually made no move to push the activists off the refuge. And some say that's a double standard, that if the activists were African American or Muslim, they would be labeled terrorists. U.S.
morning television host Roland Martin tweeted this, quote, "Did I miss the call for the National Guard in Oregon? I recall them in Ferguson and Baltimore." Well, CNN national security analyst Juliette Kayyem has just written an op-ed piece for CNN.com entitled "Face It, the Oregon building takeover is terrorism." She joins us now. And Juliette, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, you've got dozens of armed people taking over a government facility, threatening violence if challenged. You know, if it was anyone else, would they be treated like this?
Well, it actually depends. I think in this situation, what the federal government is doing is absolutely correct, because the men have essentially isolated themselves. This isn't an urban environment. There's no civilians around. They don't have hostages. So it's a very different situation than, say, an urban uprising or a conflict in an urban area. So the federal government's approach is simply they're going to look at their watch and wait it out. And because these guys are going to run out of food, they're going to run out of water, they're going to get bored, they're going to get nervous, and then I think this siege will end, because what you don't want is violence at this stage.
Right, but as you say, there are really no civilians around because this is in such a remote area. But I understand that schools in the area have been closed for the entire week, so obviously there is some kind of security situation for anyone even remotely nearby. Why is there no police presence at all, or any kind of show of force to show them who's boss?
Well, that is curious at this stage. There is an incident command that's being established, although apparently it was still not established today. And it may very well be that at this stage the men are so isolated that simply perimeter control is okay at this stage, right? In other words, just stabilize the situation and let these guys sort of wait it out. But, you know, to your point about the curious nature of what's going on, it's why people like me are saying, you know, this is clearly terrorism. You know, the definition of terrorism does not depend on whether it's an urban environment or whether the building had been occupied. It's really about their motivation, and the federal government needs to win this standoff because, you know, basically the federal government won this debate during the Revolutionary War. The federal government has authority over the states to set laws for the states.
Right.
It's because I guess the question then becomes, what's to stop any group with any grievance taking over government facilities and making similar claims and calling yourselves defenders of freedom? I mean, basically what these guys want with a wildlife preserve that's been there since, I think, 1908 is they want it to go back to miners and loggers and ranchers. I mean, it just seems really ridiculous.
It's the craziest thing to watch people try to twist and turn an explanation of these guys as if, you know, the fact that it's rural or the fact they haven't killed anyone. This is a siege. They have taken federal property. They are very armed. They have threatened death of any police officials that try to approach them, or violence. So this, I mean, you're exactly right. That we live in a country with laws and the rule of law, and if you have grievances, you go to court, but you don't sort of take this action and then justify it by saying, well, no one's there and we're not harming anyone. And, you know, that's why it's important that we use the right terminology to remind people, look, this is scary. This is real. Because if other groups start to get the idea that this is appropriate behavior, we will live in a country without the rule of law.
Yeah, and this is a siege that really seems to have no end in sight at this point, because it's still kind of unclear what exactly it's going to take for them to get them to leave this refuge. Juliette Kayyem, we wish we had more time. Thanks so much for your perspective on this.
Thank you.
Truly bizarre, isn't it? As an
I can only
outsider
shake my
looking in,
head.
it's like,
I don't
really?
get it.
You can do that? Anyway, coming up, scientists making big